correlation between the increased levels of inflammation markers compared to the increased exposure levels. Also, be able to see that increased levels of stress hormones correlated to the benzene exposure. Then to the conclusions. It seems that shell-left model is an excellent basis for the new directives to reduce firefighters' exposure, because we're able to see that firefighters who followed shell-left model, they had lower dermal exposure through the hands, which also reflecting the low risk for oral exposure. Then they had the lower levels of exposure levels for vaporous naphthalene and also particulate pyrenes. But also be able to see that the firefighters who followed shell-left model, they had lower levels of inflammation markers. However, the model must be updated according to the needs of the rescue departments. And one of those updatings concerned about the less protected workers, assistant workers at the fire site. We have had few studies where we have shown that those assistant workers, they might expose more or even get more symptoms than those who are fully protected. So due to that, we suggested the hazardous area way of thinking, also for residential fires, as is the case in already in chemical fires. And in this thinking, the person who is in charge of the situation defines around the fire site 3 areas: immediately dangerous area, and protected area. And all these areas is defined protection levels for the workers and also the activities allowed to do in these different areas. And for example, in the protected area, there should locate emergency care, maintenance of firefighters, fire trucks, and also police forces. Also, we found that maintenance of the firefighting equipment caused important meaning for the firefighters' total exposure. And that's why we thought that we need a recommendation for the protection level and for the cleaning technology. And these both have to be linked to the fire class in which the equipment has been contaminated. The idea is that more contaminated equipment, the better protection and more efficient cleaning technology must be followed. Then we gave also recommendation for the monitoring of firefighters' health condition. And we gave the frequency for the monitoring program. And also we recommended that that should include active discussion about firefighters' health risks and also the importance of firefighters' lifetime in managing the chemical load of what they get during their work tasks. Also, firefighters' exposure have to monitor more intensively, and they should register to the ASA registry, which is the registry for the workers who expose their occupations to the carcinogen agents. Also, the individual exposure should be documented more precisely, including all different kinds of exposure. Then we found out that we need a protocol for the rescue departments for the situation that firefighters has heavily exposed and get symptoms. That procedure should contain emergency care according to the firefighter's symptoms. And when we want to document the exposure levels, we are recommending urinary to-naphthalene and to pyranol for that. And for the mapping of the symptoms, we have recommended symptoms questionnaire. And if the exposure has happened through the inhalation system, lung function measurements are also valuable. But if the symptoms do not disappear in a week, firefighters must undergo further investigation. Okay, thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you, Juha. We take now a 10 minutes break. Det kaffe, frukt, strekke på beina, få litt luft. Vi møter her igjen om 10 minutter til siste bolk av Juha sitt foredrag. Så 10 minutter, folkens.
Du får sende meg noe det hun skriver ut. Ja, det går kanskje flere til å klare det. Har du bare
Bjørnberg stedet nede.
Ja, for det er alt salg, så det er bare riktig å prevere.
Ja, jeg skriver bare salg.
Ja, jeg trenger ikke ja, og hvis det er relasjoner og medlem, kan jeg skrive navn og medlem. Ja.
Da prøver vi å komme til ro igjen. Vi har fått en del spørsmål om disse foredragene. Alle foredragene vil bli lagt ut. Det blir filmet her sånn, og vil også bli lagt ut på sidene våre, så alle foredragene vil bli tilgjengelige. Så slipper du å lure på det. Da setter vi i gang med foredrag nummer 2. Vær så god, Juha.
Thank you again. Well, I continue firefighters' exposure in training conditions, and the title of my presentation is Small-Time Trainers' Exposure and its Reduction in Training Conditions. First, I'm going to introduce to you the studies, what we have done in this area, and what kind of training conditions we have to use in these studies. Then I also show a few details about methods, what we have used in these studies, and also I give you some results, what we have got as far, and then I conclude the results. We started these studies in 2004 at the Emergency Service College in Kuopio, and they wanted that we focus on in our studies the following questions. What is how the type of the simulator affects on smoke-time trainers' exposure, and how the burning material in the simulators affect on their exposure, and how the different fire components affect on their exposure, and can we see any difference in exposure level through the hands if they're using underclothes. Then they also wanted to find out, can we find new techniques how we can reduce firefighters' exposure in modern simulators. Also in old airport we did studies in aircraft crash simulation, and the target of the study was to measure firefighters' exposure to firefighting foams. When we have to compare different kinds of simulators, I'm going to introduce you some of those what we have used in these tests. At the Emergency Service College, they used conventional simulators on the left, the firehouse and container simulators, and in these both the heat and smoke was generated by burning chipboard, conifer plywood board, pure spruce and pine wood, and as a firing liquid was used to kerosene, up to 100, and also cyanide, which contain 80% of ethanol. Then in these tests we had also so-called modern simulators, where the heat is produced by burning propane, and smoke was generated from theatrical liquids by smoke generators. At the coal airport, in the liquid fire simulations, they used pool simulators where they burned kerosene, and in the victim rescue part of the training, they used conventional simulator where they burned recycled wood. In the test where we wanted to look how the burning material affects on firefighter trainers' exposure, we used different kinds of burning materials in the firehouse, and in the first test we used materials what they used in Emergency Service College before these exposure studies. And those materials were chipboard, which produce very easy, very high temperature inside the simulator. Although they use polyurethane foam mattresses which produce very thick smoke inside the simulator. And as a firing liquid they use kerosene. For the second test we wanted to select little safer materials, and we selected conifer plywood board which contain less glue than chipboard. And the burning of polyurethane foam mattress we stopped, and for the firing liquid we selected cyanide. For the third test we selected the best available materials from occupational hygiene's point of view, and we burned pure spruce and pulpwood and cyanide. Fourth tests was done for the comparison, and